Inside a Vyper smart contract, you can define a constructor. A constructor is a special function that is called only once when the contract is deployed. The main use of a constructor is to set some state variables or to call other functions that are needed to set up the contract. One of the most common things that are done inside the constructor is to set the owner of the contract. For example, let's say that we have a state variable called owner. I'll make this public, and this will be an address. Okay, and to define a constructor, we start with @deploy, and then we need to define a special function, and it has to be this exact name: def __init __ parentheses. Inside this parentheses, you can also pass in some parameters that you want to pass to the constructor. For now, we'll leave it empty. Let's come back to this later. So to set the owner state variable, let's say self.owner is equal to message.sender. Here, message.sender refers to the account that deployed this contract. So by setting the owner state variable to message.sender, we're saying that this contract, the owner of this contract, is the deployer of this contract. This is probably the most common use case of a constructor, to set a state variable that stores the owner of the contract. Next, I'm going to show you some examples of passing parameters into the constructor. So, for example, let's first create a state variable called name. This will be public, string, max length 100. Let's pass a parameter into the constructor. For the input, I'll type name. This will be a string of length 100. And to use this input, let's say self.name is equal to name from the input. And how about one more example? Let's say that we have some timestamp. Let's call this expires at. This will be public uint 256. And for the second input to the constructor, let's pass in, say, let's call this duration uint 256 and say self.expires at is equal to the current block.timestamp plus the duration from the input. Okay, let's try compiling this contract and then deploying it. I'll click on the Vyper plugin and then click compile. Once the contract is compiled, let's deploy this. Okay, and notice that we're going to be deploying the constructor.py file. And we'll need to pass in inputs to be able to deploy this contract. The inputs will be the inputs to the constructor, name and duration. For the name, let's say Vyper, and for duration, let's just put 10. And then call transact. Okay, and once the contract is deployed, let's look at the state variables. Owner is an address. This address is equal to the account that you see over here. Okay, name Vyper expires at this timestamp.